But anyhow, when I was a young pilgrim, I came out here. I was just a greenhorn. I didn't know much about mountain ways and mountain trapping. But I hooked up with a man, a fine mountain man, by the name of Davy Jackson. Old Jackson, he was a fine, fine mountain man. And we'd been out trapping beaver. He's showing me the way, and this cold snap set in on us. It started getting cold, and old Davy says, we best head for winter quarters before we freeze to death. So we started traveling up through the high mountains, up there, the Teton area. And we were traveling along, and it kept getting colder. As I ride along on my horse, I like a little chaw of tobacco. So I'm chewing some tobacco, and you know how that stuff is. You got to get rid of it. So I go, and correct, that tobacco froze right when it hit the snow. It was so cold. We rode on a piece further, and I go, and correct, that tobacco froze right in front of my face and crystallized and fell down on the pommel of my saddle.
That's cool.
It's cold. Jackson says, well, Coon, we best bed down for the night before we freeze to death. So we pulled our mules and horses into a quaky grove, and we unloaded our plunder, and we set to making camp. Well, we were making camp, and Jackson says, I'll go out and see if I can get some meat for the spit. And he says, you build a fire. So I got my flint and steel out, and I commenced making sparks. I had the flint and steel, and I was making sparks, but them sparks just landed on the char cloth, not doing nothing. Old Jackson, he comes back. He's got a couple of snowshoe rabbits, and I got no fire. He's not a happy man. He said, let me see that. What's going on here? He grabbed that flint and steel up. He starts making sparks right over his head, he did. He caught them sparks in his mouth. He rolled them around a little bit till they thawed out. He says them sparks be freezing. He spit them out on the char cloth. By grab, we had a fire going. Put them rabbits on there. We ate good. We bed down for the night, rolled up in buffalo robes. We did. Him on one side, me on the other side of the fire. It was cold, tell ya. I'm telling you, cold. I wake up in the middle of the night. There's a little bit of moon shining through. I look across the fire. We let it burn down. I throw some wood on it. I couldn't see old Jackson. He's done gone out of his bedroll, he was. I went around there, kicked his bedroll. He weren't in it. I see these tracks going off down through the woods. I'm like, what made off with Jackson in the middle of the night? I snatched up my rifle and I starts following them tracks down the hill. Whoa! There's old Jackson. He's wrapped right around a spruce tree, he was. I pulled on his leg, he didn't come. I pulled on his arm, he didn't come. He's froze solid, he was. I was afraid I might break him. So I better just leave Jackson right there. I'd go back up to our camp and go on to winter camp and find the boys. We'd come back with axes and chop that spruce tree down and lift Jackson off and thaw him out. So I go up to camp, and all our horses and mules, they'd froze in the middle of the night. They weren't nothing but pieces of stock laying all over the ground. I saw my snowshoes. I strapped them on my feet, and off through the woods I go to winter camp. Sometime later, the sun finally comes out from behind them clouds. No heat to it, though, but there was some sunshine. And it's trickling down through there. Well, old Jackson, he's underneath that pine tree, you know. And that sun, there are big icicles hanging all over it. That sun hit on one icicle, ricochet, and they all come right down on old Jackson. It was just like one of them looking glass glasses, you know, you used to start a fire with. And it thawed old Jackson out, it did. He gets up, kicks himself. He's a little cold, you know. He's a little bit cold. He goes on up to camp, and he builds up the campfire and looks around, sees my empty bedroll. Sees my snowshoe tracks going off through the woods. Well, Jackson, he's a fine mountain man. He's not going to be embarrassed and have a bunch of guys coming back and no meat. So he grabs up his rifle and he goes to load it. He reaches for his powder horn. He done lost it in the roll down the hill. But not to be worried. We got a big keg of powder over there in our plunder. So Jackson, he goes over. What can I use? He goes over and he taps that keg of powder. As froze solid it is. He takes out his knife and tries to break a piece off. It just bends the end of his knife. It's froze so hard. Used his tomahawk. It just dented his tomahawk. Oh, Jackson, he's not known for patience. Not even a little bit. Got a keg of powder here. Jackson's got no time for patience. He looks around, sees that keg of powder. Looks at the campfire. He moves that keg of powder up closer to the fire. Builds the fire up. Goes over and hides behind a spruce tree. Comes back. Checks that keg of powder. Still froze hard it is. Patience is running thin on Jackson. He moves it up a little bit closer. Builds up the fire a little more. Goes over and hides behind that spruce tree again. Gives it a little bit of time. Comes back. Taps that keg of powder. It still froze hard. Oh, Jackson's patience plumb run out. He builds up that fire real big. He sets that keg of powder right next to it. Me and the boys were about 10 miles out when that keg of powder went up. It was horrible. The ground shook. Smoke and gas went 5 miles high. Why, spruce trees flew past us just like birds. It was horrible. We rode on into camp. What was left of it, all there was a great big hole in the ground. It was a mile deep and 5 miles across. No sign of Jackson, let alone camp. Just this big hole in the ground. It was awful. Well, he was a fine mountain man. Fine mountain boy. Every year on the way to Rendezvous, me and the boys, we stopped by and pay us our respects at Jackson's Hole. That's the true as I'm standing here, that's the truth.
If it ain't true, it ought to be.
Actually, it's Jackson's Hole is named after David Jackson. He was a real mountain man. But that was, a lot of times, a name came from somebody who kind of made it was their homeland. So David Jackson was one of the first mountain men, and he was an owner in one of these trading companies back then. Yep. See, you didn't know the true story of Jackson's Hole.
Didn't know the true story of Jackson's Hole, but I do now, by God.